I sat across from Trevor in his glass-walled office, my annual review presentation still glowing on the screen behind me. $3 million saved through my compliance work. He leaned back in his leather chair, smirking like he held all the cards. Your performance is adequate, Danae, but you're not ready for a 15% raise. The words hit like ice water. I kept my face neutral, professional. I stood slowly, thanked him with a calm voice I didn't feel, and walked out. That afternoon at 2:45, I started packing my desk. 6 months earlier, everything had been different. I had worked at TechVault Solutions for 4 years as senior compliance manager, and honestly, I loved it. When I started, we were just 20 people crammed into a small office in downtown Seattle, running on dreams and venture capital fumes. Now we had 300 employees spread across 2 floors of a sleek building with city views that made clients think we were more established than we actually were. I built our compliance infrastructure from nothing. Every policy, every procedure, every vendor relationship. I knew our security framework so intimately I could recite it in my sleep. When auditors came calling, I was the one who walked them through everything. When investors asked questions, I had the answers ready. The CEO, Richard Hastings, used to call me the backbone of operations. He meant it as a compliment, and back then, I took it as one. I had mentored our entire compliance team. Sarah, our junior analyst, came to me straight out of college not knowing the difference between SOC 2 and ISO certification. Now she could run preliminary audits on her own. Marcus, our documentation specialist, learned everything about risk assessment from sitting beside me during vendor negotiations. I gave freely because I believed in the company, believed in what we were building. The culture was family-like. We celebrated birthdays with cake in the break room. When someone's parent got sick, we covered their work without complaint. I worked late plenty of nights, responded to emergencies at midnight, covered for colleagues when they needed time off. That's what you did for family. Then Richard announced his son was joining the company. Trevor Hastings arrived on a Monday morning in April with a resume that looked impressive on paper. MBA from Stanford, 3 years at a consulting firm, 32 years old with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to prove yourself. Richard introduced him as the new VP of Operations. I would report to him. I felt a twinge of concern but pushed it down. Maybe Trevor would be great. Maybe his fresh perspective would help us scale. I scheduled a one-on-one to welcome him, to offer my support, to share everything I knew about how the company really ran beneath the org chart. That first meeting should have told me everything. Trevor sat behind his new desk, barely looking up from his phone as I walked through our current compliance projects. When I explained we were preparing for our SOC 2 Type 2 audit, critical for our Series C funding round, he waved his hand dismissively. My father worries too much about compliance theater, he said. We need to focus on growth. Compliance theater, as if protecting our clients' data was just for show. Over the next 3 months, a pattern emerged. Trevor didn't ask questions. He issued directives. He interrupted me in meetings to explain concepts I had taught him the week before. He forwarded my analysis to the leadership team under his own name. When I raised concerns about a vendor's security protocols, he told me I was being paranoid in front of the entire operations team. The worst part was watching him hire his friends. Derek Patterson came first, Trevor's fraternity brother from Stanford, installed as director of finance despite having spent his career in marketing. Then came Brad, another frat connection, suddenly our director of business development. They laughed about inside jokes from college while the rest of us tried to get work done. They treated the office like a playground and the company like their trust fund toy. The culture shifted. People started watching what they said. The collaborative energy that made TechVault special began to evaporate. Employees who had been with the company for years started updating their LinkedIn profiles. I documented everything. Screenshots of emails where Trevor took credit for my work. Meeting notes where my recommendations were dismissed only to be presented as Trevor's ideas weeks later. Calendar invites showing me systematically excluded from strategy sessions I used to lead. I didn't know what I would do with this documentation. I just knew instinctively to protect myself. 3 months in, Trevor called an all-hands meeting. He stood at the front of our main conference room, Richard beaming proudly beside him, and announced a restructuring. My compliance team would be streamlined for efficiency. Several positions would be evaluated for redundancy. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Trevor was planning to push me out. He wanted to bring in someone he controlled, someone who wouldn't question him, someone who didn't remember how things used to be. That night, I lay awake staring at my ceiling. 4 years of my life poured into this company. 4 years of late nights and weekend emergencies and building something I was proud of. And Trevor was going to erase me like I never mattered at all. 2 months before Trevor denied my raise, I got an email from Jennifer Chen at Compliance First Partners. They were our lead auditing firm, and we needed to renew our master service agreement for the upcoming SOC 2 Type 2 audit. This audit was crucial. Without it, our Series C funding round would collapse. Investors wouldn't touch a tech company without current security certifications, especially not for $40 million. I had always handled MSA negotiations with vendors. It was part of my role, and I was good at it. I understood the legal language, knew what terms protected the company, and had built strong relationships with our partners. Jennifer sent over the standard renewal agreement, 40 pages of dense legal text that most people would skim and sign. I started to review it routinely. Then I stopped. An idea formed, slow and careful. Trevor had been systematically cutting me out of decisions for months, but he didn't understand compliance. Not really. He saw it as bureaucratic paperwork, necessary boxes to check. He had no idea what SOC 2 actually required, how the audit process worked, what made it valid in the eyes of investors and clients. His new hire, Derek, kept making jokes about compliance theater in the break room, loud enough for everyone to hear. Trevor would laugh, slap him on the back. They thought it was all just performance, that anyone could shuffle papers and talk to auditors. I realized they were planning to sideline me after the audit was complete. Why keep paying me when they could hire someone cheaper, someone less experienced, someone who wouldn't push back? Derek kept mentioning his girlfriend worked in compliance. Maybe she'd be interested in opportunities. The writing wasn't just on the wall, it was in neon lights. I opened the MSA document and found Section 7, Subsection 3. It dealt with audit authorization and final certification requirements. The language was already technical, filled with terms like designated personnel and continuity requirements. I read it 3 times, thinking. Then I started typing. The new clause read, "Final audit sign-off and report certification requires authorization signature from the designated compliance lead with complete audit history knowledge, currently Danae Foster, or equivalent replacement with minimum 24 months audit continuity with Compliance First Partners for knowledge transfer and historical context verification." It looked standard. It sounded reasonable. After all, audit continuity was a real concern. You couldn't just drop someone new into the final certification phase without them understanding the full history, the context, the evolution of our systems. Compliance First would actually appreciate this clause. It protected the integrity of their audit work. The beautiful part was the specificity. I was the only person at TechVault with complete audit history with Compliance First. I had been there for every preliminary assessment, every gap analysis, every remediation, verification. Training someone to replace me would require them to be present and involved for 2 full audit cycles. That meant 2 years minimum. I refined the language until it was perfect. Technical enough to look standard, specific enough to be binding. I embedded it in Section 7.3, where it would blend naturally with other authorization requirements. Then I routed it through normal channels, sent it to Trevor with a brief note. MSA renewal for Compliance First, standard terms, needs signature by end of week for audit scheduling. I knew Trevor wouldn't read it. He rubber-stamped everything I sent him, too important and too disinterested to bother with details. 3 hours later, I got his reply. Approved. Send to legal. Legal reviewed it for company risk, saw nothing unusual, approved it. I sent it to Jennifer at Compliance First. She reviewed it, appreciated the continuity clause, countersigned it. The MSA was now legally binding. I printed 2 copies. One went in the official company files, one went in my locked desk drawer. I didn't plan to use it. I really didn't. It was insurance, protection, a safety net I hoped I would never need. The next week, I met with a mentor from my previous job for coffee. She asked how things were going at TechVault. I found myself telling her everything. The undermining, the credit stealing, the systematic exclusion. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe things will improve." She gave me a look. "Danae, you're too smart to believe that." She was right. But I wanted to believe it anyway. I wanted to believe that merit mattered, that good work would be recognized, that the company I had helped build would value me. 2 weeks later, I walked into my annual review meeting with Trevor. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation showing my contributions. $3 million in cost savings from renegotiating vendor contracts. 0 audit findings in our last assessment. A compliance team that other departments praised as responsive and helpful. Measurable, documented impact. Trevor barely glanced at my presentation. He had already written his evaluation. I could see it on his desk, the ratings already filled in. Meets expectations across the board. He had decided before I walked in the room. That's when I realized this was never about my performance. This was about Trevor establishing dominance, showing everyone he was in charge, that the old guard didn't matter anymore. My expertise, my contributions, my 4 years of loyalty, none of it mattered to someone who had never had to earn anything himself. He slid the review across his desk. "You're not ready for a 15% raise." I looked at him, really looked at him. He expected me to argue, to plead, to make my case again. He was ready for it, probably looking forward to it. I stood up instead. "Thank you for your time." His smirk faltered. He hadn't expected that. I walked out of his office, my heart pounding but my face calm. I went back to my desk. It was 2:45 in the afternoon. I started packing my bag. The next morning, I arrived at exactly 8 o'clock. Not 7:30 like usual. Not the 7 o'clock I used to come in when we had urgent deadlines. 8 o'clock, as specified in my employment contract. I made coffee, checked my email, responded to urgent items. At 2:45 p.m., I saved my work, shut down my computer, and packed my bag. Sarah looked up from her desk. "Heading out." "Contract hours," I said pleasantly. Trevor happened to be walking by. He stopped, leaned against the cubicle divider. "Half day. Standard business hours," I replied. 8 to 3 with a lunch break. His smirk returned. "Right. Well, have a nice evening." I did. I went to a yoga class I had been skipping for months, made dinner that didn't come from a takeout container, read a book, slept 8 hours for the first time in weeks. The next day, the same routine. 8 to 3, exactly 40 hours per week as specified in my contract, nothing more. By the end of week 1, small fires started burning. A vendor emailed late Thursday needing urgent compliance documentation for their own audit. Previously, I would have responded that evening. Now, the email sat in my inbox until Friday morning. The vendor had to push their timeline back a day. Derek came to my desk Friday afternoon at 2:30, confused about an audit requirement. "Can you explain this to me?" "Sure," I said. "The manual is on the shared drive. Section 4 has detailed explanations. I'm about to head out, but feel free to read through it and we can discuss Monday morning if you have questions." His face fell. "I kind of needed help today." "Monday morning works great," I said warmly. "Have a good weekend." Trevor's assistant emailed at 5 p.m. Friday asking me to review something urgent. I saw it Saturday morning. Responded Monday. "Happy to review this during business hours this week. Nothing I did violated my contract. Nothing was technically wrong, but the efficiency that TechVault had taken for granted, the extra hours and weekend responses and late-night problem solving, all of that stopped." Week 2, Trevor called a team meeting. He sat at the head of the conference table, trying to project authority. "I wanted to talk about teamwork," he began. "At TechVault, we're a family. Family members step up when needed. They stay until the work is done." I nodded along, saying nothing. "Some people seem to have forgotten that," he continued, looking directly at me. "Some people seem to think compliance is a 9 to 5 job." "I think you mean 8 to 3, I said pleasantly. "My contract specifies 40 hours per week. I provide 40 hours of work. Team players go above and beyond," Trevor said. "Team players are compensated for going above and beyond," I replied. "I'm happy to discuss overtime compensation or a salary adjustment that reflects expanded hours." His jaw tightened. That's not how we do things here. Then I'll continue meeting all my contractual obligations, I said. Which I believe is exactly how we do things. He couldn't argue. Technically, legally, contractually, I was doing my job. He wanted to threaten me. I could see it in his face, but we both knew he had nothing concrete. The meeting ended. Other team members looked uncomfortable. A few nodded at me as we left. That afternoon, I noticed Marcus leaving at 4:30 instead of his usual 6 p.m. Sarah packed up at 5 instead of working late. They were starting to question why they gave free labor to a company that didn't value it. Week 3, things escalated. Trevor had been assigning some of my work to others, trying to show he didn't need me. Derek attempted to negotiate a contract renewal with one of our security vendors. He came back triumphant, having gotten them to reduce their quarterly rate. I reviewed his agreement. He had accidentally eliminated a critical service level guarantee. If we had a security incident and needed their emergency response, we were no longer guaranteed under 4-hour response times. We could be waiting days. For a company about to raise a massive funding round, this was disastrous. I sent a polite email pointing out the issue. Derek had to go back to the vendor, admit his mistake, and renegotiate. The vendor, now knowing we were desperate, increased their rate instead. We ended up paying more than the original contract. Trevor had to personally smooth things over. I said nothing, did nothing except point out the contractual issue. But the message was clear. This stuff mattered. Expertise mattered. You couldn't just hand compliance to anyone and hope for the best. Week 4, Richard's assistant reached out. Would I have time for coffee with the CEO? My stomach tightened. This could go several ways, but I agreed. We met at a cafe near the office. Richard looked tired, older than I remembered. How are things, Danae? He asked. Busy, I said. We're gearing up for the audit. Right, yes, he stirred his coffee absently. Everything okay with you and Trevor? So he had noticed something. I'm focused on delivering my core responsibilities. He studied my face. You've been leaving early. I've been leaving at the end of my contracted hours. I corrected gently. You used to stay later. I used to do a lot of things, I said. But my role has evolved. He seemed puzzled. I could tell Trevor hadn't told him about the raise denial. Hadn't mentioned that he rated me as merely meeting expectations despite my documented contributions. Richard still thought everything was fine, that his son was successfully running operations. If there's anything you need, Richard said, my door is always open. I nodded. But we both knew it wasn't that simple. Trevor was his son. Blood versus 4 years of good work. I knew which one would win. Meanwhile, my LinkedIn was blowing up. Recruiters from other tech companies, compliance positions at major corporations, even a headhunter for a Fortune 500 company. They saw my profile, my experience with TechVault, and wanted to talk. I took 3 interviews. Just to know my options. 2 companies made offers. One was for 30% more than my current salary. Another offered a VP title and equity. Both were tempting. Both were escape routes. I didn't accept. Not yet. Something kept me waiting. Some instinct that the story wasn't over. Then came the Friday afternoon that changed everything. 2:45 p.m., I was packing my bag when my phone rang. Richard directly, not his assistant. His voice was tense. Danae, I need you in the conference room immediately. I noted the time but went anyway. The conference room was packed. Richard sat at the head of the table, his usual calm replaced with barely controlled stress. Trevor stood near the window, arms crossed. Derek looked pale. Our CFO, Patricia Chen, was reviewing something on her laptop with a grim expression. And 2 people I didn't recognize sat across from Richard, their expensive suits and leather portfolios marking them as venture capital partners. Richard gestured for me to sit. Danae, thank you for coming. We have a situation. One of the VC partners spoke. I'm Jonathan Reeves from Lighthouse Ventures. We're the lead investor in your Series C round. I knew who he was. His firm was putting in $20 million of the $40 million round. We've just been informed, Jonathan continued, that Compliance First needs to conduct your SOC2 Type 2 audit next week, not in 10 weeks as originally scheduled. Next week. The room went silent. I felt the implications cascade through my mind. We weren't ready. We had 10 weeks of preparation planned, documentation to finalize, systems to configure, gap assessments to complete. You couldn't just snap your fingers and be ready for a SOC 2 audit. Why the change? I asked. The other VC partner, a woman named Susan Martinez, answered. One of our portfolio companies had a major data breach last week. Customer data, financial information, everything. It's going to be a nightmare. Our firm is now requiring expedited security audits across our entire portfolio. Non-negotiable. When does the audit start? I asked. Monday, Richard said quietly. 1 week from today. And the funding close? I asked, though I knew the answer. 3 weeks, Jonathan said. We need the certified audit report in 16 days or we walk. Those are the terms from our investment committee. 16 days. It normally took 4 to 6 weeks to complete a SOC 2 Type 2 audit once it started. And we weren't even ready to start. Trevor pushed off from the window. We can do this. Danae, I need you to coordinate everything. Pull the team together. Well, work around the clock. Everyone looked at me. The weight of the company's future, $40 million, 300 jobs, all hanging on my answer. I pulled out my phone, checked our audit readiness tracker. We're missing critical documentation in 8 areas. We need to update vendor compliance letters. 3 systems need pre-audit configuration. The evidence repository needs to be completely reorganized to auditor specifications. Can it be done? Richard asked. I looked at him. It requires approximately 120 hours of work over the next 5 days. That's with my team working full-time plus overtime. It's technically possible. Then we do it, Trevor said. Everyone goes into overdrive mode. Danae, you'll lead the preparation, I'll handle stakeholder management. I looked at the clock on the wall. 2:57 p.m. I can start Monday morning at 8 a.m., I said. The room went silent. Patricia looked up from her laptop. The VC partners exchanged glances. Trevor's face started to redden. This is an emergency, he said slowly. I understand, I replied calmly. I'll prioritize it during business hours, starting Monday. You need to stay now. We need to start planning immediately. My contracted hours end at 3 p.m., I said. I'm happy to begin Monday morning. Trevor's voice rose. The company is on the line here, Danae. I'm aware, I said. And I'm happy to discuss compensation for emergency hours and overtime work. You're not getting more money for doing your job, Trevor snapped. Richard finally spoke. Danae, please, we need you. This is critical. I felt the moment's weight. Every person in that room needed me. The company I had helped build was teetering on the edge. $40 million, hundreds of jobs, everything I had worked for. But I also felt something else. 4 years of underappreciation crystallizing into clarity. The raised denial, the systematic undermining, the casual dismissal of my expertise, the assumption that I would always be there, always sacrifice, always put the company first, while it put me last. I'm happy to discuss compensation structure for emergency work, I said again. Otherwise, I'll see everyone Monday morning at 8. Trevor stepped forward. You're sabotaging us. I'm establishing my value, I said quietly. There's a difference. Susan, the VC partner, spoke up. Perhaps we should discuss compensation. This is clearly a critical resource. Trevor cut her off. She's being petty over a raised decision. What raised decision? Richard asked. The room went very quiet. Trevor realized his mistake immediately. We can discuss that later, Trevor said quickly. Right now we need to focus on the audit. I stood up. It was 2:59. I'm available Monday morning to discuss both compensation and audit preparation. I'm confident we can reach an agreement that works for everyone. I walked to the door. If you leave, Trevor said, you're fired. I turned back. That's your choice. But I'd recommend calling compliance first to ask about your MSA terms. His face went blank. What? The master service agreement you signed. Section 7.3. You might want to review it before making any personnel decisions. I left, walked to my desk, packed my bag, and drove home. My phone started ringing before I hit the freeway. Trevor, Richard, Patricia. I let them all go to voicemail. At 7 p.m., I got a text from Sarah. Trevor is in a panic. Telling everyone you're sabotaging the company. Said he's going to fire you. What's happening? I replied, everything's fine. See you Monday. I spent the weekend hiking, had brunch with friends, read a book in the park. My phone kept buzzing. I ignored it all. I knew what was coming. I had known since the moment I embedded that clause. The only question was whether Trevor would figure it out before he tried to fire me, or whether I would have to explain it to him. Monday morning, I arrived at 7:55. The office was already full. My entire compliance team looked exhausted. They had clearly worked all weekend. Sarah had dark circles under her eyes. Marcus was drinking his third coffee. Trevor intercepted me before I reached my desk. My office. Now, Richard was already in Trevor's office when we arrived. That surprised me. Trevor's jaw was tight, his movements sharp with barely controlled anger. Sit, he said. I sat, kept my face neutral. My heart was pounding, but I had prepared for this moment. I knew what I held. Trevor slid a document across the desk. We've made a decision. Your attitude isn't aligned with company values. This is a separation agreement, effective immediately. 2 weeks severance. I didn't touch the paper, looked at Richard instead. Does your father know about this? Richard shifted uncomfortably. Trevor has authority over his department. Does he know you denied my 15% raise after I saved the company $3 million in vendor negotiations? Trevor interrupted. This isn't about the raise. It's absolutely about the raise, I said quietly. I pulled out my phone, opened my photos, and slid it across the desk. That's your evaluation of my performance. Meets expectations. Written before our meeting. You decided to deny my raise before I ever walked in the room. Richard picked up the phone, looked at the photo. His expression darkened. Trevor, he said slowly, is this true? Her performance was adequate, Trevor said defensively. Not exceptional. $3 million in savings is adequate. I asked. 0 audit findings? Building the entire compliance infrastructure from scratch. Anyone could have done that work, Trevor said. Then anyone can finish the audit, I replied. I assume that's why you're firing me. Trevor leaned back, confidence returning. Exactly. You're not irreplaceable. I reached into my bag and pulled out a document. The Master Service Agreement. Laid it on his desk and opened to Section 7.3. You signed this MSA 3 months ago. Did you read it? Of course I read it. Trevor lied. Then you know about the final certification clause. His face went slightly pale. What clause? I read it aloud. Every word. The requirement for the designated compliance lead with complete audit history. The 24-month continuity requirement for any replacement. My name specifically listed. The color drained from Trevor's face. Richard picked up the document. Read it carefully. Read it again. You signed this, he asked his son. It was a standard renewal, Trevor stammered. Legal approved it. Did you read it? Richard repeated. Trevor said nothing. Richard picked up his phone. Dialed. Jennifer? Richard Hastings. I need to verify something in our MSA. He listened. His face grew grimmer. And there's no way to modify this clause. More listening. I see. Thank you. He hung up slowly. She confirmed it, Richard said. The clause is binding. You're the only authorized signatory, Danae. Anyone else would need 2 years of documented audit continuity with compliance first. And we have 16 days. Trevor tried to recover. We can work something out with the auditing firm. The MSA requires 90 days notice for modifications, I said. And mutual agreement. Compliance first has no reason to agree. The clause protects their audit integrity. You planned this, Trevor said accusingly. You trapped us. I protected myself. I corrected. There's a difference. You signed it. Legal approved it. It's a legitimate business term. Richard stood and walked to the window. Stood there for a long moment, his back to us. What do you want, Danae? He finally asked. I had thought about this moment for months, played it out in my head dozens of ways. Now that it was here, I felt calm. Clear. My 15% raise, retroactive to my review date, I said. A written apology from Trevor. And he no longer has authority over my position or compensation. Trevor exploded. You can't blackmail us. It's not blackmail, I said calmly. It's negotiation. You can fire me right now. You'll lose $40 million in funding. Or we can resolve this professionally and I'll complete the audit. This is extortion, Trevor insisted. Richard turned from the window. Trevor, step outside. Dad, she's manipulating you. Outside, now. Trevor left, slamming the door. Richard and I sat in silence for a moment. Did he really deny you a 15% raise? Richard asked. Yes. After saving us $3 million. Yes. He closed his eyes. Why didn't you come to me? Would you have believed me? I asked. Has your son? Richard had no answer to that. The truth hung between us. Family versus 4 years of loyalty and expertise. We both knew which one usually won. What you did was smart, Richard finally said. And deeply troubling. I didn't want to use it, I said honestly. I hoped things would improve. I hoped I'd never need it. But Trevor made it clear I had no value to him, so I made sure the company understood my value. By holding us hostage. By ensuring I couldn't be easily discarded. I corrected. There's a difference. Richard was quiet for a long time, then he picked up his phone. Patricia? My office. Bring legal. 30 minutes later, we were in Richard's personal office, not Trevor's. Patricia sat with her laptop open. Jennifer Yates from legal had her notepad ready. Trevor was noticeably absent. Richard asked me to explain everything from the beginning. I did. Calmly, systematically, with documentation for every claim. I showed emails where Trevor took credit for my work. Screenshots of him excluding me from meetings I should have attended. The calendar history showing the systematic sidelining. His meets expectations review written before our meeting. Derek's hiring despite lacking qualifications. Brad's appointment despite zero relevant experience. The pattern of fraternity brothers getting leadership positions while experienced employees were marginalized. Richard listened without interrupting. Patricia took notes. Jennifer reviewed documents with an increasingly concerned expression. When I finished, Richard was quiet for a long moment. Why didn't you come to me? He asked again. I did once, I said. 2 months ago. Your assistant said you were too busy. Maybe I could talk to Trevor instead. Richard winced. And, honestly, I continued, I wasn't sure you'd believe me. Has your son? I'm just an employee. You're not just an employee, Richard said. You built our compliance infrastructure. You're the reason investors trust us. Then why did Trevor feel comfortable rating me as merely adequate? Richard had no answer. Patricia spoke up. Richard, we need to address this systematically. The audit starts in 6 days. The funding closes in 16. If we lose Danae, we lose everything. I know, Richard said tiredly. Jennifer added, the MSA clause is airtight. I've reviewed it. Any attempt to void it would take months of litigation. We don't have months. Richard looked at me. What do you need? Really need. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes. I had written this list weeks ago, kept refining it. First, my 15% raise, retroactive to my review date, plus a bonus for emergency audit work. Market rate for crisis consulting is about $200 per hour, Patricia calculated. At 120 hours, that's $24,000. I'll approve 25, Richard said. What else? Trevor is removed from any authority over compliance operations. I report directly to you for audit-related work. Done, Richard said immediately. Derek is removed from any compliance oversight. He doesn't have the expertise, and he's a liability. Patricia nodded. I've been concerned about that too. Review all of Trevor's hires for qualifications. I continued. Not to punish anyone, but to ensure we have the right people in critical positions. Fair, Richard agreed. Written apology from Trevor. You'll have it. And a guarantee of no retaliation. This conversation could make things uncomfortable. I need protection. Jennifer spoke. I recommend a 2-year employment contract with specific protections and a significant severance clause if terminated without cause. Richard thought for a moment, then nodded. Agreed. Anything else? New title, VP of Compliance. This isn't about ego. It's about establishing authority for the work ahead. You'll have it, Richard said. But I'm offering 20%, not 15, and a $50,000 bonus, not 25. You're worth it, and I should have recognized that earlier. I felt something loosen in my chest. Validation. After months of being minimized and dismissed, here was acknowledgement of my value. Jennifer, draft it all immediately, Richard said. I'll sign today. Jennifer left to work on the documents. Patricia stayed, her expression thoughtful. What about Trevor? She asked Richard. Richard's face hardened. That's a conversation I need to have with my son. He called Trevor back in. Trevor entered warily, sensing the shift in power dynamics. Richard laid it out plainly. Danae is now VP of Compliance, reporting to me. You have no authority over her department or her compensation. She'll lead the audit preparation. You'll support her however she needs. Trevor's face went red. You're taking her side. I'm taking the company's side, Richard said. You signed an agreement without reading it. You denied a raise to one of our most valuable employees out of ego. You hired unqualified friends into leadership positions. You've jeopardized everything we've built. I was trying to make us more efficient, Trevor protested. You were trying to assert dominance, Richard said. There's a difference, and it ends now. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. Write an apology to Danae. Sincere, professional, do it now. Trevor looked at the paper like it might bite him. Dad, this is humiliating. You humiliated her, Richard said. Repeatedly. Write it. Trevor wrote something brief and bitter. Richard read it, handed it back. Try again. This time, actually apologize. It took 3 attempts. Finally, Trevor produced something acceptable. Danae, I failed to recognize your contributions and expertise. My management approach was flawed and unfair. I apologize for undermining your authority and denying your well-earned raise. I look forward to supporting your leadership in the audit process. I read it. Nodded. It wasn't heartfelt, but it was sufficient. Richard stood. Trevor, you're being moved to special projects effective immediately. You'll work on strategic initiatives reporting to me. Patricia will handle day-to-day operations. You're demoting me, Trevor said quietly. I'm preventing you from doing more damage, Richard said. Take the rest of the day. Well, talk tonight. Trevor left without looking at me. The door closed behind him. Richard turned to me. Can you save this audit? Yes, I said. But I need my team fully supported. No interference. Full authority to make decisions. You have it. I stood. Felt lighter than I had in months. Then let's get to work. I returned to the compliance floor. My team looked up, anxious and exhausted. Gather round, I said. They assembled near my desk. Sarah, Marcus, James from security documentation, and Rachel from vendor management. Okay, team. We have 5 days to prepare for this audit. It's going to be intense. But here's what's changed. I'm now VP of Compliance. I report to Richard directly. We have full authority and full support. Anyone who works overtime will be compensated. Anyone who needs help will get it. We're going to do this together, and we're going to do it right. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. What do you need from us? Everything you've got. Let's show them what this team can do. The next 5 days were a blur. We worked 12-hour days, but they were productive, focused. No Trevor, interrupting with useless suggestions. No Derek asking basic questions he should already know. Just skilled people doing excellent work. We reorganized the evidence repository, updated vendor compliance letters, configured systems to auditor specifications, created documentation that told the story of our security infrastructure clearly and comprehensively. The auditors from Compliance First arrived Monday morning. Jennifer Chen led the team. Professional and thorough, she had worked with us for 2 years and knew our systems well. The audit process was smooth. We anticipated their questions, provided evidence efficiently, demonstrated not just compliance but genuine security maturity. 2 weeks later, Jennifer called me into a conference room. Richard and Patricia joined us. The audit team had completed their assessment. This is one of the cleanest audits I've seen, Jennifer said. Your team was exceptional, Danae. Everything was organized, documented, and defensible. We have 0 findings. I'm certifying the report today. She pulled out the final signature page. Read aloud from the MSA. Final sign-off and report certification by designated compliance lead, Danae Foster. She slid the document across the table. I signed. The audit was complete. SOC 2 Type 2 certified. The funding could proceed. 3 days later, the Series C closed. $40 million secured. The company was safe. 300 jobs were safe. Everything we had built together was safe. Richard called me into his office. The board wants to recognize your leadership in the audit. They're issuing you additional equity. 5,000 shares. Thank you, I said. No, Danae. Thank you. You saved us. And I'm sorry it took a crisis for me to see it. 3 weeks after the audit closed, Trevor announced he was pursuing other opportunities. He resigned. Quietly, quickly, with no fanfare. I felt no triumph in his departure. No vindication, just relief that the chapter was closed. 6 months later, I sat in my new office. Corner office, windows overlooking the city, my name on the door with VP of Compliance etched in glass. It still felt surreal sometimes. The compliance department had grown. I had hired 3 exceptional people based purely on merit and expertise. No frat connections, no nepotism, just talent. The company culture had shifted back toward what it once was. Collaborative, merit-based. People felt safe again. The old employees who had been updating their LinkedIn profiles were engaged again, contributing again. Richard had implemented new accountability measures across the board. Performance reviews were standardized with clear criteria. Compensation decisions required documentation and justification. No more arbitrary ratings from managers protecting their ego. My team was thriving. Sarah had been promoted to senior analyst. Marcus was leading our vendor compliance program. We left at reasonable hours. We respected boundaries. We proved you didn't need to sacrifice your life to do excellent work. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what I had learned. About power, about value, about the difference between being vindictive and being strategic. I didn't set out to destroy Trevor. I set out to protect myself. The clause in the MSA wasn't a weapon. It was a boundary, a way to ensure that if the company needed me, it would have to acknowledge needing me. What surprised me most was how simple it had been. One carefully worded clause, one moment of strategic thinking, and everything changed. But it only worked because I genuinely had value. The clause was meaningless without my expertise, my relationships, my deep knowledge of our systems. You can't manufacture leverage. You have to build it through competence and consistency. I got a LinkedIn message one Tuesday morning. A young woman named Jessica, working in compliance at another tech company. She had seen my profile, my recent promotion, and wanted to ask for advice. She was dealing with a manager who was undermining her, taking credit for her work, denying her recognition. I agreed to coffee. We met at the same cafe where Richard and I had talked months earlier. Jessica was nervous, uncertain, clearly struggling with the same questions I had faced. How did you do it? She asked. How did you stand up for yourself without getting fired? Know your worth, I said. But more importantly, know your leverage. Understand what makes you valuable, and make sure that value is visible and documentable. I told her about the MSA clause, about malicious compliance, about boundaries versus vindictiveness. The goal isn't to destroy people, I said. It's to establish your value clearly enough that they can't ignore it. Sometimes that means letting them fail. Sometimes it means strategic positioning. But it always means knowing exactly what you bring to the table. Jessica took notes, asked questions, soaked in every word. One more thing, I said. Document everything. Not for revenge, for truth. Because when the moment comes, you need to be able to show exactly what happened without emotion or exaggeration. Let the facts speak. She thanked me profusely. As she left, I realized I had become the mentor I had needed 6 months ago. The person who could validate that standing up for yourself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. I returned to the office. Found an email from Richard. Board meeting next month. They want to discuss expanding compliance into cybersecurity consulting. Can we talk about you leading a new division? Another opportunity, another challenge. The company was growing, and they wanted me to grow with it. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Trevor. I wanted to apologize again. For real this time. You were right about everything. I've been doing a lot of thinking, working with a coach, learning what I should have learned before I ever had authority over anyone. I hope you're well. I read it twice, surprised. I typed back, thank you for reaching out. I wish you well in your next chapter, and I meant it. I didn't need him to suffer. I needed him to learn. Sounds like maybe he was starting to. I thought about my own learning. 4 years of loyalty that was taken for granted. Months of being undermined. One strategic decision, and a complete transformation of my career trajectory. The lesson wasn't about revenge. It was about value. Your value isn't determined by people who refuse to see it. Some people will never recognize your contributions, no matter how excellent your work. That's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their limitations. The strongest power you have isn't in demanding recognition. It's in building systems where your expertise becomes undeniable, where your absence would be catastrophic, where your presence is not a nice-to-have but a necessity. Boundaries aren't about being difficult, they're about being respected. When I started leaving at 3 p.m., I wasn't sabotaging the company. I was demonstrating what happens when you treat expertise as disposable. I was showing the cost of undervaluation in terms they couldn't ignore. And sometimes, the best way to win isn't to fight harder, it's to position yourself so strategically that when the critical moment arrives, you're the only solution. Not through manipulation, through genuine, documented, undeniable value. I learned that contracts matter, words matter, details matter. That clause I embedded wasn't clever trickery, it was legitimate business sense. Audit continuity is real, knowledge transfer takes time. I simply made explicit what was already implicitly true. Most importantly, I learned that you don't need everyone to see your worth. You just need to see it yourself. And then act accordingly. Know your value, document it, build systems that reflect it, set boundaries that protect it, and never, ever make yourself smaller to make insecure people comfortable. The company I helped save is thriving now. I'm thriving now, not because I destroyed anyone, but because I refused to let anyone destroy me. That's the real power, not the ability to hurt others. The ability to protect yourself while still doing excellent work, maintaining your integrity, and creating value. 6 months ago, I sat in Trevor's office feeling powerless. Today, I sit in my own office, building something meaningful, leading a team I respect, making a difference I can measure. The journey from one to the other was shorter than I expected. One clause, one boundary, one strategic decision to value myself as much as I valued the company. That made all the difference. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up for your worth at work? Have you been in a situation where you felt undervalued despite your contributions? What strategies have you used to establish boundaries or demonstrate your value? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I learn from your experiences just as you've learned from mine. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. It helps more people find these stories and know they're not alone in their workplace struggles. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories about navigating professional challenges, establishing boundaries, and recognizing your own value. And share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for yourself, that strategic thinking isn't manipulation, and that knowing your worth is the first step to being properly valued. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you recognize your own value and gives you tools to protect it. Remember, you don't need everyone's approval. You just need your own respect and the courage to act accordingly. Until next time, know your worth, document your value, and never settle for less than you deserve.